Wedding planners, what made you say, this one's not even going to last a year? I have seen brides fight their grooms at the reception, I've seen a bride bash a family member over the head with a bottle of champagne, I've seen small children whip burning tea lights at guests from a floor above. I've seen a guest try to fake a slip and fall to sue the venue. Probably the most WTF was a very obviously arranged marriage. Most of the planning was done by the parents, because they were local and the kids were traveling overseas. Red flag. Day of, we meet the happy couple to be. I'm really bad at judging ages, but she seemed at least old enough to consent. And, I should add, she was gorgeous. Could have been a model. The groom, however, almost a foot shorter than she, very lanky, looked like he was squarely in the middle of an adolescent awkward phase. My staff and I had difficulty not giving any outward signs that we were very uncomfortable. The body language was perplexing and then just sad during photos. Culturally, it's not uncommon for PDA to be kept to a minimum, but the way she leaned away from him and could barely look at him. She was so obviously miserable. To this day I regret not offering to help her escape through a bathroom window. I told myself it was not my place to interfere and that I should just shut up and do my job. I will never take another client without a face-to-face with the bride first. I hope they're not still together. Event manager with a caterer. Pregnant maid of honor told the bride's sister that she's been frocking the groom and the baby is his. She was dead sober, which is what made it so odd that it came out like that. Needless to say we got to go home early that night. If she were pregnant, I would hope that she was sober. For the kid's sake at least. She waited until the wedding day to say something? I mean, I guess it's better than the day after, but holy smokes, she should have mentioned it as soon as she found out she was pregnant. Of course, she should not have been frocking her best friend's fiancé to begin with. I worked the most amazing wedding ever. The marriage didn't last 6 hours. I was bartending for the reception. Everything seemed pretty typical and standard as guests arrived, drank, and conversed. The wedding party arrived and everything seemed to be completely normal. Everyone was happy, having fun, etc. When it came time for the formalities, the bar closed and everyone took their seats. The speeches began, with the maid of honor, and best man. Everything was going as per usual for a wedding until the best man finished his speech and the food began to be served. The groom grabbed the mic after the best man's toast and wished everyone a great night and a nice meal. That's when shit hit the fan. After his well wishes, he asked for the attention of his best man and bride. He told them that he knew they were having sex behind his back for the entirety of the engagement, and that he would be filing for an annulment on Monday. He thanked everyone for coming, and apologized to the father of the bride saying, I would have called it off weeks ago, but I figured you would be way more pissed at your little princess when you couldn't get out of the bill for the reception. He turned to his wife and said frock you, then turned to his best friend and said, from what I overheard my duck is still bigger than yours. Mike dropped, groom out the door, absolute chaos. Me and my fellow bartender looked on in amazement. We had to go into the kitchen to laugh and high-five. Edit, thanks for all the comments. Many of you asked about what happened after. Here you go. Fallout. Bride ran directly to the bathroom both furious and inconsolable, with bridesmaids running after. Mother, aunts, and about 20 other women tried breaking into the bathroom, which she apparently locked herself in. She refused to come out until everyone left the facility. She left through a back door with her mother and a few of the bridesmaids after an hour and a half. The best man was surrounded by the groomsmen in what seemed to be a circular questioning of WTF? He made a run for the door, only to be followed by his parents, who had the most saddening look of disgust on their faces. He made it out the door. The groomsmen and the majority of the crowd wanted him gone for obvious reasons. He got in a cab with his family. Apparently his mother was crying from the moment he was outed until they left the facility. he was gone with his family in a matter of minutes. A lot of people were focused on the bride, and the majority of people were still in disbelief. Outside of the embarrassment and the obvious anger from his immediate family, he got off easily, though I have no idea what the residual effects were the days following. I imagine he lost quite a few friends, and the respect of his family. The bride's father went from complete disbelief, anger, rage, tears, all in a matter of minutes. Nobody would say a word to him. Friends tried to approach and he pushed everyone away. He kept his composure better than most would from what I saw and heard. Just kind of faded to the back and tried to apologize as people gathered their things and left. Weeks later I found out that my boss did give him a big break on the bill. My boss said he felt so terrible, and as much as he hated to lose money, he felt it was the right thing to do. The crowd was like a group of zombies walking out the door. Quiet whispers and shuffling feet with looks of horror on their faces. I remember one guy started laughing, and his SO hit him with a purse. That place was cleared out in about 15 minutes. Bride still waited another hour before she thought she could leave and spare further embarrassment. Edit. I noticed the comments about hearing this kind of story or myth before. This story is 100% true. Happened in Cleveland, Ohio 2008. Oh man. The poor bride was 6 months pregnant at the time of the wedding, puking regularly. The groom was 3 hours late to the ceremony. By hour 2, he hadn't even picked up his tux. The venue almost cancelled the reception because the groom's number was the only contact they had and nobody knew what was going on. He finally showed up and everything went as planned, albeit 3 hours later. My mom was 2 hours late to her wedding. She got stuck in nasty traffic and then spent a good 45 minutes trying to get out of the car. She had one of those huge hoop skirts. No idea how she got into the car in the first place, but she was just stuck and her parents and her were dying laughing. Meanwhile my dad's in the church, freaking out thinking his bride ran away. They've been married for 30 years now. Years ago I was a waitress at a fancy restaurant where we regularly had weddings. One night we had this massive wedding party. His side were one of those families with loads of money but not an ounce of class. Just rowdy, loud, and incredibly rude, making sure to let everyone know how rich they were. She was a quiet, shy girl with a small family full of boring mousy types. As the night progressed his family just got drunker and louder as hers hid in the corners, visibly annoyed. At one stage the groom grabbed the microphone, and did a heavily intoxicated version of Frank Sinatra's My Way whilst his whole family cheered him on. Afterwards he turned to his bride and slurred over the speakers, "Tonight, we will do it my way, wifey," and then proceeded to make doggy-style thrusting gestures. The bride flushed bright red, got up and walked out, her mum on her heels. She didn't come back. The groom stayed and got so trashed his disgusting family had to carry him out at the end of the night. It was spectacular. They didn't last long. My SIL. She announced in front of everyone how her wedding was blessed by God and mine wasn't because she was married in the Catholic Church and I had a civil ceremony. 7 years later and I'm the only one still married. Wow. I can't help but think people who are rude like this in front of a large group make themselves look dumb as opposed to the person they are trying to embarrass. I had a wedding couple come to see me by appointment to plan the music for their church wedding ceremony. They each brought their respective mothers to the planning session. Right out of the gate, they started arguing over choices for the processional. The groom-to-be wanted something to show off the full organ whereas the bride-to-be wanted something smaller scaled and gentle. There was no middle ground, no matter what organ pieces I showed them. Then, of course, their mothers took sides and further intensified their bickering, even though I asked them politely to let the couple choose their own selections. In the end, it really wasn't about the choice of music. It was about a fundamental crack in the foundation of their soon-to-be marriage, an unwillingness to compromise or to even hear what the other was attempting to convey. Sadly, Their marriage ended in divorce in less than 2 years. How they made it that long I'll never know. I catered weddings for several years, and the subtle sign I always paid attention to was how closely the bride and groom sat next to each other during the speeches, dinner, etc. The happy couples were always right on top of each other, sharing food, laughing, and just generally chatting. They were in their own world, while the rest of the wedding went on around them. Other times, the two would be practically on the other side of the table from one another. The groom would spend the whole meal turned away chatting with his groomsmen, while the bride looked the other way staring into space. Families can be a-holes, people get drunk, and nightmares happen, especially as the night progresses, but if you don't care enough to appreciate the presence of your spouse the very first time you sit down next to them, you have no chance once the real world takes over. Minister friend did a wedding once where in the vows the woman wouldn't say for richer or poorer. Just kept saying for richer or richer. And she wasn't joking. They didn't last long. My husband accidentally said in sickness and wealth, poverty and health during our wedding vows. It was the funniest thing ever. I now pronounce you husband and gold digger. I used to play bass in a soul band that occasionally played weddings, so I'm not really in the planning business, but I was privy to some shoot storm weddings. The one that sticks out the most wasn't actually a wedding at all. One Saturday afternoon the keys player and I drive up to a rural Texas town for what we assumed was just another wedding. We arrive at a fairly large church and are told to load in our gear into the gym. First thing I noticed that was off is the wedding was Dia de los Muertos themed. It was February. There was a plastic skeleton band at the entrance to the gym. I might still have a picture of it somewhere. We head over to a makeshift stage against the back wall and start setting up. The bride comes up to talk to us and she has fake blood all over her dress to go with the theme. She's in her mid-40s and clearly a huge fan of the band because I recognized her from a few previous shows. She already seemed a little drunk. So we set up, sound check, and we're told to leave the area for the ceremony and we will have our performance and dinner right afterward. So we hang outside the gym shooting the shit for about half an hour before we're told to come back in and play our set. We're all holding our instruments ready to go when the bride steps on stage and takes the mic from the lead singer. She says she's sorry the groom couldn't make it to the wedding. Then goes on a long-winded rant about how she doesn't think she'll actually ever get married, and how thankful she is that her dad was still willing to pay for her to have a wedding anyway. So long story short, this woman duped a bunch of people to a fake wedding that her dad paid for. I was sitting there with my mouth open the whole time thinking what the fuck is going on. I really wanted to know what happened for the 30 minutes we were sitting outside in the parking lot, but I never got a straight answer. We played the show, people seemed to have an alright time. Ate some food, made some cash. But I never forgot the time I played a fake wedding. Was a groomsman in a friend's wedding about 8 years ago. He was in the army and had a chaplain he was friends with officiate it. So we are all standing there listening, trying to act like we are paying attention. The chaplain is going on about couples today sometimes get married for the wrong reason. They don't know each other well enough, don't think things through, or rush into something they aren't ready for. So then he's silent for a moment and they starts the vows. We were all in shock. The parents on both sides were furious. They lasted about 8 months. He was a reservist and got deployed out, was a cop when home, and she started sleeping with his patrol partner, like 2 days after he left. He got an email from her saying it was over, she wasn't happy, that she hated his husky and had tied her up and left the house a week ago. We all rushed over there as soon as he let some of us know. She was half starved but okay after some food, water and a rush to the vet. My brother's wedding. Let's just say my brother is the epitome of brothers. I swear he was born wearing a polo shirt and Oakleys. His entire wedding weekend was more about him having to leave his drinking buddies than marrying his wife. The dinner the day before the wedding was at his favorite bar, which happens to be right across the street from his condo. His poor wife didn't get a word in about anything, while the dinner and the reception speeches were just hordes of brothers telling drinking stories. One of the bridesmaids tried to say something about the bride and actually got told to shut up by one of the groomsmen. The best man just happened to be my white supremacist uncle, who had his Iron Eagle tattoo prominently shown throughout the ceremony. Half of the wedding pictures were my brother and his groomsmen showing off their alcohol-themed socks. Fun time though. A donkey started braying during the ceremony for about 5 minutes, and I had the pleasure of hearing my drunken grandma loudly pronounce that this is a shoot show. Me and my brother don't get along that well. Bride warned groom several dozen times in my presence if he smashed the cake in her face they would have issues. Using phrases like "I am not kidding" or "I am completely serious." Groom was a good OL boy type. His friends found out about his bride's one stipulation about the wedding. She was flexible on a lot of other things, but no frocking cake smashing. They started making whip cracking sounds, teasing him that he was whipped and needed to put his foot down and show her who's boss. Yeah, he smashed the cake in her face. She had it annulled. Ironic how, in trying to not look weak and whipped, the guy ended up caving to his friends instead. For something as minor as not embarrassing her at her wedding. Good for her for getting out. I honestly hate the cake smashing in face thing. Why would you want to be all messed up after looking so nice for the day? Not to mention it could get on your dress and stain it, etc. Seems like such an unnecessary thing. I think having it annulled is a bit much, but it was a dumb thing for the groom to do. I'm planning my own wedding right now, and these threads are like crack to me. I'm completely single, and these stories are still like crack to me. Not a planner, but a photographer. Bride and groom both lovely people, but the groom's mother, at the reception she got so drunk that she leaned over in her chair and just puked on the floor. She spent the next 2 hours wailing and crying because she, told everybody, thought her son deserved better. As I was packing equipment back into my car, I spotted Mil in the bushes, dress around her head, legs in the air, and a group of people trying to get her out. I later found out that she shied herself at a later point in the evening, and the bride spent time cleaning her up. Didn't think the marriage would survive with a toxic Mil like that around. Then I saw on social media that the bride and groom moved overseas, far away from their families. Obligatory not a wedding planner. I worked as a receptionist for a conservatory and garden. We were an extremely popular wedding venue 7 days a week year-round. But this is the one that stuck out. A couple of families came in on a Sunday afternoon during business hours. They were dressed very nicely, but again, was a Sunday, so not all that unusual. There appeared to be an older teen girl, a boy around the same age, their respective parents, and a smattering of grandparents. Looking back on it, with the exception of a couple of the grandmas, everyone looked either ill or angry. Everyone but one of the fathers paid their admission and went inside. The father made it known to me he was still waiting for someone. No big deal. Well, about 10 to 15 minutes later, in came a priest. Black robes, white collar, the works. It then occurs to me that all these people must be here to scope it out as a wedding venue. I took the admission, then went to get our on-site wedding coordinator, in case the family wanted to see her. I find her, and we start heading towards where I last saw the group. We were floored to see them by our water feature very obviously conducting a wedding. Very obviously a shotgun wedding that the kids had no control over. Was startling and funny and sad all at once. With the amount of strong-arming they got, I doubt they lasted. Wedding photographer here. 2 things come to mind. In one instance, the bride and groom just could not be bothered to be seen together at the wedding. I had to virtually drag them for getting some photos of the 2 of them together, and they kept walking off hang out with their friends. It would be one thing if they hadn't seen their friends in forever, but one friend they lived with and the others were in the same town. The other one was a groom who looked like he was 16, he was actually 21 but was tiny and looked young. When I started taking photos, he said, "In all seriousness, you have to tell me what I need to do, this is my first time getting married, I'll do better next time." Turns out the wedding only happened because the bride's mother was dying and the bride wanted her mother to see her get married. I'm wedding planner as well as officiant. I forgot to ask for and sign this couple's marriage license, I sign and send to the county for recording. So I texted the bride and she said, "Oh, no need, we haven't gotten our license yet and we'll do it legally a different day." Ok. A few months later she's with husband/not husband's BFF. And now they're engaged. I wonder if she'll be a repeat customer of mine? Another not a wedding planner, but story. The night before our wedding, my husband and I were staying at the hotel we would be getting married at the next day. Another couple had gotten married there that night and our room happened to be right next to theirs. The couple had decided to continue the party in their room, blasting music, screaming at their friends from the balcony, and generally making so much noise at such a late time that we called the front desk. The next night, our own wedding was done. We were hanging out in our room, gorging on leftover cupcakes, and getting ready to go to bed. The couple next to us, it turns out, had decided to stay an extra night. But this time they were screaming at each other. We couldn't figure out what exactly was going on, but we clearly heard the woman yell, "I can't talk to you when you have your pouty face." 3 years later we still use that on each other and it instantly diffuses any argument. I often wonder what happened to them.